the Heyoka Empath. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. In order to help you understand about narcissists, narcissism, and the interaction between narcissists and other people, I categorize people into 4 groups. This aids understanding. The first group is that of the narcissists, my group. We have no emotional empathy. Some of us are able to exhibit cognitive or fake empathy. We are manipulative. For many narcissists, that's instinctive and they're unaware. For a much rarer group, there is cold, calculated, Machiavellian manipulations that take place. We have no empathic traits, although we can fake them. And we, of course, have strong narcissistic traits. The sub-schools cover from the scummy lower lesser all the way up to your glorious narrator, the ultra. And if you'd like to understand more about the sub-schools and also the cadres, which are somatic, victim, elite, and cerebral, you can do no better than to search for the relevant terms amongst my videos and access the Knowledge Vault, details in the video description, to enjoy the excellent H.G. Malls series, so that you are able to understand more about the characteristics and behaviours of the relevant subschools and cadres. So that's the narcissist group. We then also have the narcissistic group. These are people who are not narcissists, but have strong narcissistic traits and low empathic traits. They also have limited emotional empathy. These individuals can be manipulative and know that they are being manipulative. We then have the largest group, the normals. These individuals have emotional empathy and have considerable emotional empathy, albeit for a smaller range of people. This group have narcissistic and empathic traits, but generally low on the scale. They lean more towards narcissistic or empathic, dependent on where they are on the spectrum across the normal section. And then we have the final group, the empaths. The empaths are the individuals who have the addiction to the narcissist, which can be understood more in the addiction triple package, see the Knowledge Vault. I categorized empaths into schools and cadres. The cadres are martyr, saviour, carrier, geezer, and magnet. And with regard to the schools, there's the largest group, standard, and then codependent, super, and contagion. Again, there is more information about those various schools and cadres throughout my work, written and video, and you can learn a lot more about those behaviours alongside additional material also found in the Knowledge Vault. The various schools of the empath have differing traits vis-a-vis the way that they behave towards people and particularly towards the narcissist. Standard empaths, for example, have emotional empathy for a wide range of people, and they behave in an unobtrusive, quiet, and unassuming fashion. Their behaviours are governed by instinctive behaviours most of the time. They don't have to think about exercising their emotional empathy, it just happens. But they also do consider the position of other people through what is known as safeguarding emotional empathy. The contagion empath, briefly, is an individual that experiences the feelings and emotions of other people, a highly attuned form of emotional empathy, but they behave with a similar moral compass to that of the standard empath. They just feel more. The codependent is somebody that finds validation by strapping themselves to the narcissist, finding that by being under the wing or the umbrella of the narcissist they find a reason to be. And I explain in great detail the behaviours and creation of the codependent empath in my book, Chained. Finally, there is the super empath. The super empath is not, as many people think, some kind of kick-ass super ninja that goes around beating up, metaphorically or even literally, narcissists. Some kind of super being that swoops in and makes the life of the narcissist an absolute misery by repeatedly battering them in some shape or form. Not at all. The super empath is more of a defensive individual, whereby they draw a line in the sand, where they'll brook no further abuse or poor behaviour from the narcissist. They react at an earlier stage to the abuse to defend themselves. And it's more about a resilient defence as opposed to going necessarily on the attack. And this is where a considerable mistake is made. Because you'll have seen in the comments, and I see it occasionally in emails and in comments on my other forums, where people come along and they say to me, HG, I am the super ninja ultra Heyoka empath. And I think to myself, no, you're not. First of all, anybody that goes around proclaiming that they are such an individual is mistaken, because that is not how the empath behaves. Certainly, if a person was to make inquiry as to what type of empath do you believe that you are, you may give an answer. And in some instances, of course, if you've undertaken the empath detector and people ask you about that, you can say, I undertook it and the determination was that I was a majority super empath or a majority codependent, exhibiting a significant minor contagion element and also a significant standard minority element, for example. But the individual that comes along declaring, I am the Heyoka empath, simply is incorrect. They're incorrect for two reasons. First of all, there is no such thing as the Heyoka empath. Basically, the Heyoka is something that has been appropriated from the culture of the Sioux. And it's been taken from Native Americans and twisted, and I'll tell you why it's been twisted in a moment, into something else. The Heyoka was seen as a kind of sacred clown in the culture of the Sioux, of the Great Plains of North America, and the Heyoka is seen as a contrarian, a jester, a satirist, and somebody who speaks, moves, and reacts in an opposite fashion to the people around them. They have apparently visions of the thunder beings of the West, and who are recognized as such by the community, can take on the ceremonial role of the Heyoka. The Lakota medicine man, Black Elk, apparently described himself as a Heyoka, saying he had been visited as a child by the thunder beings. The Heyoka is thought of as being backwards and forwards, upside down, or contrary in nature. This manifests by their doing things backwards or unconventionally, riding a horse backwards, wearing clothes inside out, or speaking in a backwards language. For example, if food is scarce, a Heyoka may sit around and complain about how full he is. During a baking hot heat wave, a Heyoka might shiver with cold, and put on gloves and cover himself with a thick blanket. Similarly, when it is freezing, he might wander around naked, complaining that it is too hot. A unique example is the famous Heyoka sacred clown called the Straighten Outer. Apparently, he was always running around with a hammer trying to flatten round and curvy things, soup bowls, eggs, wagon wheels, etc., to make them straight. You'll have seen so far, what has that got to do with emotional empathy? What has that got to do with someone being empathic? The short answer is nothing at all. Indeed, such an individual is looking to draw attention to themselves. They're being unconventional, awkward, difficult. Those are not empathic traits. The Heyoka symbolizes and portrays many aspects of the sacred beings. The satire for the Heyoka presents important questions by fooling around. They ask difficult questions and say things other people are too afraid to say. Their behaviour poses questions. By reading between the lines, the audience is able to think about things not usually thought about, or to look at things in a different way. Principally, the Heyoka functions both as a mirror and a teacher, using extreme behaviours to mirror others and forcing them to examine their own doubts, fears, hatreds and weaknesses. Heyoka have the power to heal emotional pain. Such power comes from the experience of shame. They sing of shameful events in their lives, beg for food and live as clowns. They provide laughter in distressing situations of despair and provoke fear and chaos when people feel complacent and overly secure, to keep themselves from taking themselves too seriously or believing they are more powerful than they are. In addition, sacred clowns serve an important role in shaping tribal codes. Unbound by societal constraints, Heyokas are able to violate cultural taboos freely and thus critique established customs. Paradoxically, however, by violating these norms and taboos, they help to define the accepted boundaries, rules and societal guidelines for ethical and moral behaviour. They are the only ones who can ask why about sensitive topics. They use satire to question the specialists and carriers of sacred knowledge, or those in positions of power and authority. Now, of course, some of those behaviours that I've just described there exhibit some empathic traits. For instance, the ability to apparently heal emotional pain, or by utilizing humility and a strong moral compass to essentially take somebody down a peg or two so they don't take themselves too seriously. Also, they appear to provide some kind of support, exhibiting compassion, but it doesn't necessarily make them empaths. The Heyoka is not an empath. The Heyoka is something else altogether and has some empathic traits, but would not be described as an empath. Indeed, they will probably be seen as some kind of derivation of a normal individual with certain particular talents. But what has happened is that certain individuals have taken the concept of the Heyoka and decided that that equates to being a certain type of empath, and that's incorrect. The behaviours of the Heyoka don't stack up with that of the empath. They simply do not. So who is it that has suddenly decided that that is what they are, and that is what they're going to proclaim to other people? Well, occasionally there may be somebody who is just simply mistaken. They have read misdescription of the Heyoka empath and thinks, oh, that applies to me, and therefore they are mistaken. But where it came from originally, this corruption of suddenly believing that the Heyoka is some kind of empath, of course, stemmed from the behaviour of an unaware narcissist. The unaware narcissist believed that their contrarian behaviours, the fact that they speak out about things, i.e. they have no boundary recognition, that they have that sense of entitlement to say what they want to other people, that they believe that they are special, magical thinking, that they believe that they have these special powers, and consequently, unaware of their narcissism and those traits of a sense of entitlement, a lack of accountability, poor boundary recognition, certain manipulative behaviours, aspects of the narcissistic dynamic, and magical thinking and grandiosity, all tally with them actually being a narcissist and nowhere near being an empath. But as you know, there are many unaware narcissists, typically mid-range, who think that they're empaths. The middle range type A, the overwhelming angel, who believes that they are truly a kind and helpful person, as do many mid-rangers, from lower mid-range, middle A, middle B, up to upper mid-range. And similarly, the individuals who thought that the Heyoka was some form of empath were actually narcissists, blinded by their own narcissism, believing themselves to be special, and created this concept of the Heyoka empath, appropriating, lack of boundary recognition, something that is within the Native American people and corrupting it into something else. In a similar way that the narcissist takes the notion of love and corrupts it into something that's meant to be magical and romantic all of the time, thus the love bombing that occurs. And what has happened is that way back then, the Heyoka empath, having been misappropriated and created into the idea of being a Heyoka empath rather than just a Heyoka, along come other unaware mid-range narcissists at a later stage and say, hey, that's me, because their narcissism blinds it to them. And you will see that these individuals in the comments section, who perhaps write blog pieces, come along and proclaim it to all of the world. Yes, I am a Heyoka empath. Look at me. But their behaviours don't sit with anything that equates with the empath. And so you can see that discrepancy to begin with, and then added to it also is the simple fact that their grandiosity causes them to proclaim themselves to be this thing which doesn't actually exist. It's similar in a way to those individuals that come along and say, yes, I am a super empath. Watch out, I take narcissists down left, right and centre. I eat them for breakfast. I am the destroyer of narcissists. That is not the behaviour of an empath, and it's not even the behaviour of a super empath. It's the behaviour of an unaware mid-range narcissist. Of course, where you point this out to them, their narcissism will not let them accept it, and therefore it's an entirely futile exercise. What you do is allow their behaviours to speak to themselves, and then other people are able to see this is not anyone who is an empath, they're not a super empath, this is an unaware mid-range narcissist. You'll have seen that behaviour in various forums, in below-the-line comments, and behaviours in real life also. Accordingly, The Heyoka Empath doesn't exist. The Heyoka does, but the Heyoka isn't an empath. It's an individual with empathic traits, but is not an empath. And there has been misappropriation of the concept of the Heyoka to create this thing called the Heyoka Empath, but it's incorrect. And then, that corruption which has occurred as a consequence of the grandiosity, magical thinking, and blindness of mid-range narcissists has then been seized upon repeatedly, either by people who might be empaths but are mistaken, or more usually by further unaware mid-range narcissists drawn to the grandiosity and magical powers associated with this construct, the Heyoka Empath, which simply does not exist. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.